Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. There are quite a number of news stories to get into for this episode, so I don't think, and plus I really don't have anything else to say for, housekeeping, so let's get right into the news. First, we're going to talk about India. Okay, so what has been going on in India is that in one of the northern eastern states of Manipur, the Mai Tai people, who basically run that state, have been having some issues with a tribal community called the Kuki, and this has been going on since May of this year, and they've basically been fighting each other ever since. Many people are being killed and displaced, and as is expected, the Modi government has essentially done nothing to address the issue. And the left-of-center opposition has basically tried their best to make sure that he faces some form of repercussions. And one of the things that they did was that they tried to do a no-confidence vote, but it was basically just to get him on the record talking about this issue and just to make their point known. What ultimately ended up happening is that Modi ended up giving a speech to try and basically pretend this issue isn't going on, and he wasn't taking this situation seriously. So the opposition walked out, and shock of all shocks, he survived the no-confidence vote. The one thing that is interesting is the fact that one of the members of his coalition has decided to rescind their support for Modi, but they voted for the no-confidence measure. So it's maybe Modi isn't as strong as he is. Although to be fair, it was literally one guy who I think was near the region that is being affected or is from the region. So basically he just felt that his specific niche wasn't being met by Modi in that circumstance. But now let us head over to Latin America to see what is up there. Well, one big thing has just happened. A presidential candidate in Ecuador named Fernando Villavicencio has been assassinated. Now Villavicencio was a right-wing candidate, and he was supposedly running as one of the anti-corruption candidates. He actually made himself known as a lawyer who basically would try to take down corruption, and he was quickly rising in the polls. Some were saying that he was actually close to making it into a potential runoff, but unfortunately that is no longer going to be happening, because while he was holding a rally on August 9th, he was shot in the head as he was getting ready to leave the rally. And then he was quickly rushed to a hospital where he was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, this was a big deal because it was literally, it was happening at that moment. Randomly, just his name started trending, and it was videos of him getting assassinated, getting transported to the hospital, and then the declaration of his death came out really fast. There was also a video of the event that was still going on at the time where some of the people were still shooting. 6 people have currently been arrested, and one of the big questions that a lot of people have been trying to ask is who and why. Well, shortly after the event happened, a post on social media, a video that was allegedly from a criminal group called Los Lobos, allegedly claimed responsibility from the attack, but the authenticity of it is yet to be determined. And then there was a separate video where the Los Lobos gang said, no, we didn't do it. We are in fact being framed. And there have been 6 arrests that have been made, and the 6 men who have been arrested are shown to be Colombian hitmen. But there's one big question. Who hired them? And almost immediately after Villavicencio was assassinated, they immediately shifted the blame. Immediately a bunch of blue-check Twitter accounts were saying that the person who killed them was Rafael Correa and the Foro El Sao Paulo, the Sao Paulo Forum, and Rafael Correa, as the evil communists allegedly did this. Now, it's a load of baloney, because one of the things they kept spreading to claim that he did it was that he released a video with the presidential candidate of his party that's going to be running in this upcoming election. And in the video, Rafael Correa says, For these 6 years of corruption, our personal revenge will be forceful. And what happens is that they took out the part where he says, our personal revenge will be forceful, and then they take that clip, then post it around and said he is legitimately threatening Fernando Villavicencio. It's like, he was not mentioned in the clip whatsoever. So it's like, what are you doing? And I know what they're doing. They're just intentionally spreading misinformation. Because that's apparently a huge thing in Latin America. Literally, follow any Latin American politician, especially one from like Central and South America. And one thing you're going to be seeing a lot of is like pictures of pictures of a campaign poster or whatever with red text on it diagonally that says falso, because a lot of the time they legitimately just have to make it clear this thing that is spreading on Telegram or WhatsApp or whatever is fake. This is not an official campaign announcement. A lot of Latin American news sites have to make it very abundantly clear that no, this candidate actually didn't announce that they're suspending their bid, or no, in actuality, this candidate didn't say this thing that's been being spread around, because there's just so much misinformation down there. It honestly stinks, but that's just sadly a thing that will happen sometimes. Now let's move from one Latin American country to another, Mexico. So the opposition coalition is moving on to the next phase of their election already. I thought that there would be a little bit more time before we had to give an update on that, but no, on August 10th, they basically officially announced the certain candidates that made the threshold to move on to the next round. If you remember the rules are that not only do they have to get a certain amount of signatures, but those signatures have to be from a certain amount of states, and they have to get a certain amount of support in those states to be classified as legitimate candidates. And the only 4 candidates that actually managed to do it are Enrique de la Madrid of the PRI, Santiago Creel of the PAN, Beatriz Paredes of the PRI, and Xochitl Galvez, whose party result is a little bit up in the air. Now, as you may notice, no PRD candidate made the threshold, which, honestly, very unsurprising. What's even more unsurprising is that the PRD's leader has announced that they're pausing their entry into the Frente Amplio coalition, and they're going to try and hold a meeting with the Frente Amplio coalition to ask them, why did none of our candidates make the cut? Even though they already know why their candidates didn't make the cut. Now, as we head on over to America, I very much am I only made this news story part of the thing so I can explain a potential conspiracy theory that I have in my head now. Okay, so the news story is, it's a news story that is somewhat disappointing, but it's also somewhat expected. Ex-rebel with a cause, Mondaire Jones wants back in Congress, and that means making nice with the Democratic establishment. Basically, it's an article going on and on and on about how Mondaire Jones is making it pretty abundantly clear that not only was he the most establishment-friendly of the progressive candidates in the last cycle, but also he's making it very abundantly clear that he intends to even more play ball with them, because he's trying to push for bona fides that are very much against progressives. The biggest issue, of course, being Israel, to the point where even though he made it very abundantly clear last cycle that he likes Jamal Bowman and that he didn't want to run against him, now that there are floating potential primary bids for Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones is not going to be talking about the primary. And with this, I'm going to levy the little bit of the conspiracy theory that I have. Now, it's no secret that they wanted that, Israeli-backed Democrats and other people wanted Mondaire Jones to run against Jamal Bowman. That's not a secret. And he made it very abundantly clear that he likes Jamal Bowman, so he wouldn't run against him. But then, let's think about it this way. What did Mondaire Jones end up doing instead? Running in a different district and handing that seat to a pro-Israel Democrat. And in order to do so, he had to split the Democratic vote in order to do so. Did they perhaps specifically tell him to run in the 10th district in order to make sure that the left didn't have a candidate in that race either? Interesting. Speaking of Israel, AIPAC is making it very abundantly clear what they're going to be doing again. Like, even though they've basically done this entire time, for some reason, they like to pretend that they don't just abundantly do this, but they're doing it again. This time they're going to be even more blatant, because they're pushing to try and get, like, harder primary bids against specific squad members. Like, the specific ones that they talk about in this article are Ilhan Omar and Jamal Bowman. Some people theorize that they're going to try and get more members of the squad, but realistically, of the squad, really the only ones that I was going to list the ones that they were going to target, that they would want to target, but I thought it'd actually be easier to say the ones that they wouldn't want to target, and the only one they actually probably wouldn't want to target is Gurey Kassar, but that's because Gurey Kassar is pro-Israel. Everyone else they would want to target, but the fact of the matter is, but to be fair, AOC, Rashida, and Corey have already made it abundantly clear that they're really good campaigners. Ilhan Omar is the only one of them that actually has a chance of being, like, weak against an incumbent. And Jamal, he also has the ability to be weak, but he has not really had a prominent challenger, and that's what they're trying to get him to get a prominent challenger this time. Similar with Ilhan, when the challengers are nobodies, she's easily able to win, but when the challengers are somewhat notable, then she has some worry. Meanwhile, the rest have proven that it doesn't matter if their challengers are somebody or nobody, they actually will probably have a good chance of winning. Not to say don't donate to them or don't canvass for them or whatever, because they should still get the extra help they need. Speaking of extra help, this nation's gonna need extra help because ever so slightly the GOP just inches further and further into fascism. Governor DeSantis suspends state attorney Monique H. Worrell, citing neglect of duty. On Wednesday morning, Governor Ron DeSantis announced that he will be suspending state attorney Monique H. Worrell, citing neglect of duty. DeSantis made the announcement, saying Worrell's criminal justice administration has been clearly and fundamentally derelict, so as to constitute both neglect of duty and incompetence. The state of Florida is a law and order state, the governor said. Refusing to faithfully enforce the laws of Florida puts our communities in danger and victimizes innocent Floridians. So basically, because she is not as punitive as he is, he now gets to suspend an elected official from doing their job. Because yes, she is not a appointed position, she was an elected position. Legitimately, there is not much else to say except, really, at this point, if you are not more furious at the GOP or more angry at the GOP than ever, then really there's not much else to say. Speaking of being angry at a party, this is a person who is getting angry at a party and is throwing a hissy fit. Joe Manchin is apparently thinking seriously about leaving the Democratic Party. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin says that he is thinking seriously about leaving the Democratic Party and declaring himself an independent before the 2024 election, when he will have to decide whether to run for a fourth term for Senate or wage a third-party bid for president. And here's the interesting thing. Literally at this point, him leaving the Democratic Party makes absolutely no sense to do at this point, and in fact will only serve to invigorate the Democratic Party. Let me explain bit by bit as to why. At this point, we're entering sort of a lame duck session. Since Biden is going to be mostly focused on campaigning for president, I don't think there's going to be that much more bills that he's going to be trying to push for Congress to do at this point. 2, this doesn't really affect anything. Like, at this point, literally, like I've said this before and I've said it again, because I've been proven right about this time and time again. I still get people who try to debate me otherwise, but literally one of them just proved my point to me, because I was debating with someone on our campaigns, again, because even though everybody on the site now hates Joe Manchin, even though I bring up the fact that this is literally just what I've been saying for years now, they go, no, you're still wrong. It's like, though I'm not. I've literally just been proven right and right again. And one of the big things they keep saying is like, oh, but like there's no one better from West Virginia. It's like, guys, you don't understand. I've said this before and I say it again. I don't care if Joe Manchin is the best we can get out of West Virginia, because he isn't good. He gave Trump hundreds of lifetime justices. He tore down the Biden agenda and then voted against it anyways. With him and Sinema, we've essentially been governing with a GOP majority for years. Literally, with the numbers for the entirety of, at the very least, the Trump era, you literally just have to -1 from the Democrat and then add it to the Republican, because that's essentially how it's been. He's given the GOP what they want over and over and over again, and he hasn't been loyal to the Democratic Party whatsoever, even on the things that they would, again, literally just be like Biden's policies are half measures on half measures. Then Joe Manchin sees that and goes, no, I want to make this half measure another half measure. And I brought up these issues to people, and then one person on the Our Campaign's website said, none of these issues would have changed if a Republican was in his seat. And I said, that is literally what I'm saying. That is literally what I am saying. That's what I've been saying this whole time, and you guys just don't seem to listen. Nothing would have changed, regardless if it was Manchin or if it was another Republican. Literally nothing would have fundamentally changed, except for one thing. Here's the one thing that would change. Well, actually, the two things that would change. One, the Democrats could claim that they have a victory. They have a W. They have a majority, even though they can't do anything with that majority. But the only other thing that would have changed is that it would have incentivized other people to donate and support other races that would have been beneficial, because the Democratic Party has had to give a ton of money to Manchin because they're like, we need to protect his seat, we need to protect his seat, we need to protect his seat. Even though, again, they've just essentially been funneling money into a red seat. They've just been doing that. Like, it's not even like a situation with like other like so-called moderate like Democratic senators like John Tester, who's at the very least loyal to the party line. I might make a graph about this later to explain, like, but if Manchin wasn't there, giving the Democrats that like ability to be like, oh, we still have a majority, even if we don't put money into certain seats, then they would have put more money in certain seats. Mandela Barnes would probably be in the Senate right now. Maybe they would have given Tim Ryan that extra money. They would have like been able to make it up somewhere else. Like, that's the thing. They immediately go like, but no, like West Virginia is like, no, I don't care. I don't care. Like in this race right now, like West Virginia is lost. It is lost. It's going to flip red no matter how much money they shove into Joe Manchin. And that's why him leaving the Democratic Party is the best decision that they could make. Because if he leaves, Democrats can officially stop putting money into this race. They can stop pretending they still have the ability to win here. Anyways, let's move on to the last news story, and it's actually somewhat good news. The DSA Convention just happened. A lot of things were on the agenda. One of the first things they did was that they voted for new leaders. Some positive, some negative. Let's look over the ones that actually managed to win people. There was the anti-Zionist slate, which won 1 member. There was the Bread and Roses caucus, which is a Marxist and Democratic Road to Socialist caucus, which won 3 seats. We have Groundwork, which is a reformist and eco-socialist group, 4 seats. We have the Marxist Unity Group, the Orthodox Marxist one, 2 seats. We have Red Star, which is a scientific socialist group, 3. And the Socialist Majority Caucus, which is a reformist socialist caucus. Aside from that, we had a ton of different resolutions to pass. Honestly, there's a lot to go over, so I can't go over them all. The biggest ones that I'll have to say is 1, the smallest one that is there, is that they officially got a new mascot, which is a like Rosebud named Bud. They've pushed for the ability to run more candidates. One thing is that they wanted to run candidates for school boards. They added a new method to donate, where instead of going by a specific set amount, you instead have it go based on your income. But the most interesting set of rules was, first, their rules on democratizing DSA, which I honestly thought was way better, just by the name alone. But it turns out all it did was just wanted to expand it to a 51-member like NPC, and it's like, okay, that failed, because I mean, honestly, I don't really see the benefit of that. Because I thought, when I heard people keep saying like democratize DSA, I thought that this would be a lot more ambitious. I thought it was literally just going to be like, they wanted that every single decision for DSA would be voted on by the members. And the two most interesting ones that were voted on were, one, act like an independent party, and two, towards a party-like electoral strategy, where basically one says that it would try to establish DSA as sort of like a third socialist alternative to working, like, to the two-party duopoly, and then the second one was basically a way for them to actually handle that, like an actual plan to run left-wing candidates as sort of independent from the major two parties. Act like an independent party passed, but the actual strategy one failed. There was also another vote that happened. I can't necessarily like remember which one it was, but basically the way it was worded was basically like, if members of Congress that they currently have don't adhere to certain expectations, they will like remove their endorsements of them and like remove their membership. Which on paper sounds good, but the problem is, many people consider certain things as not living up to their expectations. And one thing that was brought up as an example would be that if they, say, appeared at a J Street conference, that would be considered breaking DSA's rules, and that would rescind the endorsements of many members of the squad. I think essentially it would have kicked out the entire squad, and it's like, no, that's stupid. But for the most part, DSA's bills and whatever's did good. I will include a link in the description of like the full document explaining all of the things that happened. With that out of the way, let's move on to the main topic of this video. A person who legitimately I went from not caring about to liking to hating in a very short amount of time. Like, my perspective on them changed so drastically. It's just so weird. So let's just get into it. The person in question is Briahna Joy Gray. Briahna Joy Gray was a former lawyer who ended up becoming a political commentator, among other things. So basically, here's some of her history. She graduated from law school working as a corporate litigator in New York City for Dewey Pegno and Komarsky LLP, and also Strzok and Levin, all the while hosting a podcast called Something's Wrong on the Internet. She was then hired by The Intercept in 2018 and wrote columns for The Rolling Stone, Current Affairs, The Guardian, New York Magazine, among others. She, like a lot of people, supported Bernie Sanders' 2016 bid, and also she stated that she voted for Jill Stein in the general election. But she didn't really end up becoming famous until she was picked to be the national press secretary of Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign, and her name recognition shot up through the roof, especially after the campaign ended, because after the campaign ended, Briahna Joy Gray made a very stunning decision by publicly announcing that she would not be backing Joe Biden in the general election. And due to this, Bernie Sanders then stated that he was, like, basically he was saying, like, yeah, she's doing her own thing, we're doing our own thing, she's my former press secretary, not on the payroll, basically saying, like, he didn't agree with her stance. And many people viewed it as a bad thing, and as such, she was considered a martyr for the movement or whatever. Not really a martyr, but like a pariah, I think. Becoming very popular in a certain crowd of people who were kind of getting tired of Bernie, but also people who were fans of Bernie. Basically anybody who was like not really a fan of Joe Biden or the two-party strategy. After the campaign ended, she returned to trying to write articles and then created a new podcast called Bad Faith, where she got an interesting co-host by the name of Virgil Texas from the hit online show Chapo Trap House. And then she was chosen to be the third torchbearer of the quote-unquote left on the hit show Rising, the show that The Hill gave Crystal Ball that she pretends she came up with. Now, on a first glance, you would basically just not really see an issue. And yeah, I didn't really see an issue either. Like, I mean, I never cared about her previously. And then when Bernie Sanders did the whole thing where he was like, okay, I don't like associate with her anymore, that's when I jumped on the Briahna Joy Gray train and was like, yeah, woohoo. But to be honest, I still didn't really care about her. I just followed her just because it was like, that was the cool hip thing to do. And I didn't really care about her show with Virgil, Texas, because it's like, I didn't really care about Virgil, Texas. I didn't care about Chapo Trap House. That's one weird thing. It's like, even though I'm all in this movement, there are a lot of like shows and figures that I just never got into. I never got into Crystal Ball. I never got into Chapo Trap House. I never got into Destiny. I never got into ContraPoints or whatever. But then I think the first thing that made people kind of start like souring on her was basically her response to the Virgil, Texas grooming allegations. For those who don't know, Virgil, Texas was accused of grooming a 17-year-old girl, and then after these allegations were made public, Virgil, Texas just flat out disappeared, and nobody has heard from him since. Now, I don't even think that any of the people associated with him made any formal statement on the issue, to the point where Briahna Joy Gray, despite the fact that these allegations came out 2 years ago, is still using branding on her channel and Patreon of Virgil, Texas. Now, I don't know if this came before or after, but around the same time, that's when Force the Vote happened, and I think that's when I officially jumped off the Briahna Joy Gray train, because, legitimately, I just don't like Force the Vote. You know my position on Force the Vote at this point. Force the Vote was stupid. Anybody who was in favor of Force the Vote didn't know what they were talking about or was intentionally lying to you. And Briahna Joy Gray was making it very abundantly clear that she was in that crowd. One of the things that ended up happening during the Force the Vote controversy was during one of the Force the Vote town halls or whatever, she stated that Michael Brooks would be in favor of Force the Vote if he were alive. Now, from what I gathered, she didn't even know Michael Brooks, at least not personally. So what ended up happening was, during one of the many Force the Vote debates that she had with Anna Kasparian got mad and because she was insulting Briahna Joy Gray, and then Briahna Joy Gray was saying, "This is so disappointing and ugly. Out of respect for the National Nurses United members and organizers that I've been corresponding with, I only ask that you refrain from attacking my integrity further." And then Anna Kasparian responded with, "Is it as ugly as you putting words in my dead friend's mouth to bolster your shockingly endless efforts to promote a now irrelevant tactic?" To which Briahna Joy Gray said, and I quote, "Please don't use Michael like this." Even though everybody pointed out the fact that she was the one using Michael Brooks, not Anna. And Briahna Joy Gray has very much positioned herself in the dumb left crowd, saying things that are incredibly dumb and barely, if at all, qualify as left-wing. And in typical dumb left fashion, one of the things that they just love to do, and then they immediately go, "Why do you keep insinuating that I'm right-wing?" is trying to give praise to right-wingers. One of the things that she did was praise Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Among Congress members, Republicans are the more vocal anti-interventionists right now. Marjorie Taylor Greene is out here outflanking squad members on the absurdity of giving aid to Ukraine while American babies starve.
For those who don't know what that's in reference to, it is because Marjorie Taylor Greene, she made a whole stink about like, oh, why are we giving aid to Ukraine when there's a baby formula shortage? But then, like literally, not that long after that clip came out, like I literally think in that week, a bill was introduced to address the baby formula shortage, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, shock of all shocks, didn't vote for it. Like, that is just the one thing that's just like, how can you actually take these people seriously? Legitimately, how can you take them seriously when they just point blank show that they are not serious by point blank showing like, oh, we're gonna give the right wingers credit where credit is due, and then it's just like, no. They immediately just will not get the credit that they don't earn the credit because they're hypocrites. And then Briahna Joy Gray will say, no, you see, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, no, you're not. You're literally not. In preparation for this episode, I watched the video where she debated Vaush, and Vaush is just like handing, it's literally embarrassing that I even considered her to be a serious political figure, because she's just completely unserious. We'll get to the one biggest unseriousness that I can think of, but she does it all the time. Every time there's something to give credit or praise to the right, she's always there, ready to pounce and give that credit. But then always will critique the left and shit on the left. She loved the Twitter files, even though the Twitter files was literally a nothing burger. It was literally a nothing burger. She kept going on and on about oh, it's very impressive work, very big work. Even to the point where she puts them on the same level as some of the biggest listen to this.
Over and over again, so-called conspiracy theories have been proven to be true. We've talked about them on this podcast, not just the Hunter Biden stuff and the kind of Twitter file stuff that Elon Musk understandably is focused on there, but the Chicago police and the FBI fully murdered Fred Hampton of the Black Panther Party. You have things like the Tuskegee experiment, which frankly lent a lot of skepticism for Black Americans as we entered the COVID pandemic, knowing that there were these decades-long experiments on Black people where they were diagnosed but not treated for syphilis, so that these scientists could track what happens if you never treat a disease that is ultimately going to kill them and make them crazy. That kind of medical malpractice. Of course, they're going to have skepticism of the industry. This conspiracy of the CIA's involvement with the Contras and bringing cocaine to the United States of America. And to Russell Brand's point, and I really appreciate how he reorients this from some of the more kind of partisan bickering conspiracy theories to the big ticket items that really serve to oppress the majority of working class and poor Americans. Things like the Pentagon budget, 50% of which goes to private sector contractors. Why aren't we talking about that more? Why aren't we talking about how our political parties are two wings of the same corrupt beast that have been flying us into disaster for years? Those are the stories you're not getting on mainstream news, and that are frequently derided and sidelined because they are framed as conspiracy theories.
She's literally comparing Iran-Contra and the Tuskegee experiment and Fred Hampton's assassination to the Twitter files. Here's another example of her running to the right to give credit to them or give praise to them while shitting on the left.
But my growing concern is that in the interest of seeming fair, in the interest of protecting your guy, there's going to be a sort of detente where everyone agrees that nobody can ever be held accountable. And when I say nobody, I mean people who are rich and powerful. And that is the deal that has been struck in D.C., in government for a very long time. Nixon doesn't go to jail. Bankers aren't prosecuted after the financial collapse. Hillary isn't prosecuted. Pence isn't prosecuted. Biden is unlikely to be prosecuted for this document case. And the Donald Trump being prosecuted of it all does stand to perhaps open a Pandora's box of sorts. And it's not entirely clear to me that everybody has really played out how far this is going to go. There's two ways to have consistency. To also prosecute Donald Trump for his lesser crimes of unlawfully retaining documents, but which are, in fact, crimes that have been prosecuted for normal people, or to let Donald Trump off the hook. And you could argue that if you really do care about accountability, the move is to apply the rules consistently against the more powerful people. That also includes someone like Anthony Fauci, if it is actually demonstrated that he knew about the inadequacies.
Well, and look,
So, in order to make us send Trump to jail, we also have to send someone who didn't do anything wrong to jail? I'm not understanding the logic. She's also one of those people who likes to give legitimate praise to the people who are running against Joe Biden. Not just Trump, which even though she clearly seems to be doing for some reason, but also Marianne Williamson. Originally, it seemed like she was just going to be a Marianne Williamson person. That's how it always starts with these people. It always starts out with just Marianne Williamson, but then somehow it turns into not just Marianne Williamson. For some reason, they also give, praise to RFK Jr. It's it's always just that. For some reason, they always want to give praise to RFK Jr., and then when you call them out for that, they're like, oh, you're just being like anti-democratic. You don't want Biden to face any challenges. Like, no, it's just, why are you giving praise to RFK Jr.? Like I criticize Marianne Williamson for a lot of the same things I criticize RFK Jr. on, but it's like, with Marianne Williamson, you could have like some pretending of like, oh, there's more to it than that, or to try, like, everything else is used to try and hide the fact that she's an anti-vax crank. But RFK Jr., he's literally just an anti-vax crank. It's like, what else is there? And she's been trying to go around trying to say like, oh, we need more people to rally behind Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. or whoever else decides to challenge Joe Biden. And one of the things that she decided to do was she invited Kshama Sawant on her show to point blank ask her, like, hey, would you consider, like, having you and your party support Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr.? And this interaction legitimately made me go, like, how can anybody take this woman seriously? How did anybody take this woman seriously when this is the interaction that she legitimately has with Kshama Sawant?
Them to show why they are fighting for, how they are fighting for working people, or that we should see them as fighters for working people. I think, Briahna, the bar has to be very high. It can't be based on the feeling of desperation that I know a lot of people are feeling, that, we don't want Biden, we need an alternative. Okay, so let's maybe Marianne it is, maybe RFK Jr. I don't think that approach works. I mean, maybe you won't agree with me, but this is what I said when we talked about Marianne Williamson too, the last time I was on the show, that it's not. I mean, I would be only too happy to be proven wrong, that, oh, maybe one of these candidates is actually going to be a fighter for working class, but I don't see it happening. Honestly, RFK Jr., I don't care what he says. He's an insider. He's a political insider. What if AOC...
Michelle, so was Bernie. I mean...
No. Bernie was not an insider in the way that RFK is. It's simply not true.
But Shama, Bernie was in Congress for like 40 years. I mean, this is not a criticism. I love Bernie, but,
But here's the deal, though. We supported Bernie in that campaign because it was clear that at that time it was going to really catch the country by storm. And as I said, that tens of millions of people were going to be really energized by his call for, taxing Wall Street and ending student debt and Medicare for all. It was about those things, and in his willingness to actually stick to the message and campaign. I mean, do you remember how many people mocked him for giving the same speech everywhere? That is exactly what he should have done. And my point is that if you are going to support a candidate that is running in the Democratic Party, your bar has to be very high. So I don't agree with you. No, neither of these candidates are rising to that level. And if they want to, they can. Nobody is stopping them. So because it's not a personal thing. It's about what we owe working people. And what I owe working people right now is to not fuel any illusions whatsoever in either of these candidates. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is.
First of all, she literally went to Kshama Sawant and then tried to get her to endorse Marianne Williamson or RFK Jr. Just the fact that she did that is incredibly stupid. But also, the more interesting part was where Kshama Sawant was basically explaining why her and her party endorsed Bernie and won't endorse someone like these two. Basically saying that them endorsing Bernie was the exception to the rule. Like, Bernie was different. Bernie was an outsider. And then Briahna Drug is just like, no, I mean, come on. Bernie was an insider. Bernie's not an exception to the rule. Like, literally, it's just like, what? How could you legitimately say that Bernie Sanders was not an exception to the rule? She legitimately, just based on that interaction, it's just like, how can you take her seriously? She was literally going to someone who was objectively further to the left than her, who was telling her that the reason why she supported Bernie was because he was an exception to the rule, and then went like, no, you see, you're not actually leftier than that. Well, I am. And with that, I honestly don't think I can really say much more. Like, I had other clips of her praising RFK Jr., but it's just like, yeah, it's just like, Briahna Gray whatever she was in the past, she's no longer that. Or much like Jimmy Dore, she was an idiot the whole time, and I just was too naive to realize. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify a future video when it comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to our website, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, or consider supporting me on Patreon.